I might as well finish and tell you the rest."
"Oh, please do, da."
"Very well. The only other place I've been to where our kin do dwell is a world called Athas. I've only been there briefly, mind, but 2 days on a single occasion. But given my curious and inquisitive nature, I tried to learn as much as I possibly could about our kin there, as soon as I realized they dwell in that strange and unforgiven land. Now, the dwarfs of Athas in many ways are unlike any of our kin that I've come across anywhere else on the plains. For starters, neither dwarf nor dwarf ladies have any hair whatever, anywhere on their bodies, and no hair means no beards."
"Dwarf men with knee beards? Really, da? Lions from the sea and dwarven men with knee beards? I've believed everything else you told me, like I always do, but knee beards? Tell me the truth, da."
"I'm telling you the truth, lad, and may Mahal strike me down with his great hammer were it to be otherwise. Neither dwarf men nor dwarf women in Athas have a single hair on their bodies. In most other ways they are like us and our kin across the plains, however. They're short and stocky, about the same height as us dwarfs of Arda and elsewhere, their menfolk measuring about 4.5 to 5 feet in height. Lies the rest of us, they are strong and sturdy and can endure terrible hardship. Since they're out working in the dreadful sun of that world all day, their skin have turned a deep tan. Like us, our kin on Athas love the ringing of hammer on anvil and the sweet respite after a long day's toil. Like us, they take pride in the things of beauty created with their own hands, and like us, they value family tradition and bonds of loyalty. They bear grudges and remember true friendship. Alas, the dwarves of Athas have nae land to call their own. There is no Khazad-dûm, no Thorbardin, or Karaz-Ankor. They have to contend with living alongside men, sometimes in large enclaves, mind you, but nevertheless without a proper place to call their own. Most of the world of Athas is an unforgiving sandy desert, due to a magical cataclysm brought about in ages past. This desert is dotted by a few city-states, so countries like Khazad-dûm, consisting of only their single city and a few surrounding lands. But these city-states are above ground and are largely populated by men. Nevertheless, the dwarves of Athas are sometimes respected for their superior craftsmanship, and they trade the goods they make with men of the same city-state. Alas, many dwarfs are enslaved by men in those lands, who use our kin for hard labour. Some are even made to mate with mannish slaves they keep to produce a race of half-dwarfs called the Mool. For this, to work, the man is always dwarvish, and the woman always of the race of men, and their poor offspring, born into slavery, can be either, but is always infertile, which means they can't have children with anyone. The mole lead harsh lives, often made to fight by their masters in so-called arenas as something called gladiators. A slave who kills other gladiators for the amusement of other people, who watch them from benches in stalls like huge steps in a stair. Well, that's about as much as I know about our kin on Athas. Mind ye, I was only there for a couple of days. Oh, yes, now I remember that there is another place I've visited, which is similar and not so similar to Middle-earth. It is a place far removed in space, but not in time. That is to say, the people there use the same kind of tools and weapons and armour as we do in Arda, and have not had the time to invent anything else. For instance, the dwarfs there don't have the gunpowder boomsticks they have in Malus. I got there from the portal in our cellar, the same that I used to travel everywhere else, and when I emerged, I found myself between some fir trees of the same type you would find in the highlands of the Troll Shores, near a lantern on a tall metal pole. Come to think of it, that lantern was different from anything we have in Middle-earth. This place, which is called Narnia, has a race of dwarves also, and in most respects they are like our kinsfolk in other planes and worlds I have visited, though perhaps a bit shorter. There are two main subraces, red dwarfs and black dwarfs, easily distinguished by the colour of their beards and hair, the red dwarfs being red and the black black, which also matches their dispositions, which the red dwarfs being more cheerful and jocular, positive and optimistic, whereas the black dwarfs are more dour, sullen and taciturn. Both are, I suppose, are prone to anger, and not letting an insult pass, which you never should, son. But the red dwarfs are said to be more undwarf-like and forgiving, letting anger wash away and insults slide, which again you never should, whereas the black dwarfs never forget a wrong and ensure to always punish the evildoer, no matter how long it takes. Both black dwarfs and the red, like the rest of our kin, are superior metalsmiths, armourers and miners, masons and all manner of craftsmen. Narnia also has its own half-dwarfs, or renegade dwarfs as they are sometimes called. They are the descendants of dwarfs who had escaped a massacre following something called the Telmarine Conquest, which they accomplished by shaving their beards, sacrilege, and wearing high-heeled shoes, and eventually marrying and interbreeding with men. Naturally, those half-dwarfs are despised by many of our Narnian kin for their cowardice. Finally, there are the so-called duffers. Very little known about these, and I have myself never visited Coriakin's island where they live. I only know about them from a red dwarf, and I know he has himself visited the island on a few occasions, and seen and spoken with these duffers. They appear to be smaller than the average Narnian dwarf, but I could be wrong on this, as even my friend has only met them a couple of times, and only a few of them on those occasions. They are certainly sillier and less noble than the black and red dwarfs, and are known to sometimes plant boiled potatoes so as not to have to do it once they've dug them up, and to wash their bodies before dinner. Their dishes, to save time after it. This sort of behaviour leads me to believe that the duffers are not dwarves at all, but petty dwarves, which leads me onto the final topic of today's tale. Anyway, all dwarves of Narnia, including the duffers, are said to be creations not of Mahal but of Aslan, the hero of their world, who takes the form of a great lion. The petty dwarves, are they really dwarves at all? Here in Arda, in Beleriand in the First Age, the last petty dwarf died at the hands of the Adan Turin, and that petty dwarf was called Mime. So now there are none of them left. The petty dwarfs were descended from dwarfs of all 7 clans who had been exiled for deeds of wickedness. In this time before the first morn, before the first time the sun rose in the east, those evil kinsmen wandered westward and came one by one into Beleriand, which besides the land of Lindon sank under the waves when Ancalagon the Black, greatest of all dragons, fell upon it at the end of the First Age. They were there before any of our other kinsmen, and they even arrived before the elves. The petty dwarves banded together for survival rather than any fraternal feeling, and they built a small set of strongholds in the hills and mountains of the land at Nulukisdin and Shurbhund, which are names in their own language, a debased dialect of Kuzdul, which quickly turned into its own language. They quickly lost their skills at smithy, masonry, and all other crafts they had once possessed, however, so before long they were unable to further expand their holdings or form more complex societies. Their physical forms deteriorated with the deterioration of their skill, so that they became smaller than true dwarves, gaunt, huddled, and deformed, often hunchbacked, and with strange protrusions from their skeletons, often with very wrinkled skin and many warts in spite of their young age. The Eldar, specifically the Sindar, thought the petty dwarves were two-legged beasts and hunted them for sport before they had heard them speak. The Sindar at first called them Levine Taddail, which means two-legged animals. When the Noldor arrived in Beleriand and Finrod founded Nargothrond, the base of that great elven underground city was the cavernous stronghold of Nulukizdin, of the petty dwarves. The petty dwarves thought their skill had diminished, so that they could not expand their village on their own. But they were able to help the Noldor elves build their kingdom with their diminished but now newly awakened skill in masonry. They were handsomely rewarded by the king and dwelt among the elves in Nargothrond. But they resented the elves, and especially the Noldor among whom they dwelt, for as they saw them as having usurped their stronghold. And so the same meme I mentioned before tried to knife King Finrod in his sleep. He did not succeed, but both he and all the petty dwarves of Nargothrond were expelled by way of punishment and precaution. This ousting was gladly aided by our true kin from Nogrod and Belagost, who by then had arrived as emissaries and tradesmen in Nargothrond. The Firebeards and Broadbeams were, 'tis said, handsomely paid by King Finrod, both for expelling the petty dwarfs and for expanding and further embellishing the great halls of Nargothrond. Well, that's really all there is to say about the petty dwarfs of Arda. Mime was the last of them, and he was slain by Turin Turambar, the Mormegil, the Black Sword. But there are other dwarfs, if you'd call them that, very similar to the petty dwarfs in the world of Kryn, which, if you recall, is a world with dwarfs in it I've mentioned previous. The people I'm referring to are the gully dwarfs, or Agar in their language, of the dwarfs of that world. They are said by many Krynians to be one of the most repulsive races of that world, but unlike the petty dwarfs, are very much alive, and their chief, their so-called High Bulp, even holds a seat on the Council of Thanes in Thorbardin. The High Bulp is said to be the gully dwarf, most expert at grovelling his way out of any predicament. The Agar were one of the original dwarvish clans living in Calthax. Their first High Bulp was a gully dwarf known as Phase to the men of that world. He led his people at the time of the creation of Thorbardin. The gully dwarfs of that realm live in villages and hamlets, in gullies, hence their name, of the hills inhabited by hill dwarfs that skirt the mountains of Thorbardin. Those gully dwarfs that live outside Thorbardin mostly do so in abandoned villages, mines and caves of other races, though some of the Agar built simple settlements of their own. They are not skilled in the arts and crafts as are other dwarves. Their stature is much smaller than that of other dwarves, though they don't have the physical deformities of the petty dwarves of Arda. The gully dwarves of Kin are said to eat anything. They often keep a kettle constantly boiling and throw anything they can find, even dead or almost dead animals, into it. I know because I visited a gully dwarfish settlement in an abandoned managed mine a couple of times on Kryn. Those of all the dwarven races, on all the plains I've been to. Well, that's all I can tell you. And now I realize it's late, and you only have about 6 hours to prepare for the test.
Don't worry, Da. Test time more than enough.
Dwarves with knee beards and lions in the sea. Who would have believed it?